Hey guys, welcome back to Clueless Gamers. I'm Pete.
I'm Brian.
And this is a new segment on the channel. I know there's a lot of people out there that are probably going, what's going on here? You know, there's a lot of movies and video games and kind of TV shows on this channel. We're doing something a little different. None of those videos are going away, but me and my friend Brian here have kind of just want to do a football podcast since probably high school we were just talking about before we went on camera. So we're finally doing it right here a day before the official, Sunday games of week one of the NFL, 2020 starts off. We obviously had the Chiefs-Texans game on Thursday night, but we're getting into the meat of week one coming up here tomorrow. So we want to discuss that with a podcast that at the moment I think we're calling First and 10.
Sounds good to me.
That's kind of the name we're settling on right now. You can let us know down below if you have some other name suggestions. But we're just going to kind of give a quick rundown of the off-season because we really haven't even talked to each other about it. We'll jump into maybe the Thursday night game that already happened, and then we'll kind of go into some of our week one predictions, games we want to highlight, players we want to highlight, stuff like that. So, Brian, without further ado, let's jump into the first part of this, the off-season. And I really haven't talked to you about anything that happened. It's been a incredibly historical in all the wrong ways off-season with 2020. As I'm sure everyone, I hope you were staying safe and healthy out there. This pandemic of coronavirus has really upset a lot of things, including our sports, right?
No question.
It's obviously people's health and all that stuff is more important. But this is something that kind of helps people, whether it's just, to get away from all of the bad things that are going on in the world. And it's great that we're having our most popular sport come back in the country like football. But what'd you think of how the NFL has handled this offseason from where it started till now?
Yeah, well, to start off, like you were talking about with the whole pandemic, we weren't even sure what the status was of any of the sports. We didn't know when we were going to see baseball again or basketball and hockey, which have done a great job in their respective bubbles, and now football too, which I'm very interested to see how it's going to work because I feel like football, when it comes to the pandemic, is harder because players and people are all on top of each other.
Oh, yeah, and then they had the whole, you saw Andy Reid on Thursday night with the face shield that he had on. And then there was a whole bunch of plays after the game. They're touching hand-to-hands without gloves. There was no mask going on there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the NFL handles testing during the season.
Yeah, and I think you look at a sport like baseball, which has done a pretty good job for the most part. Yes, they have had team-wide outbreaks, but it hasn't spread to the masses yet, and they've been able to get through the season. I think at this point you'd have to be optimistic that baseball's going to get through the season. And
I like to think so.
Let's hope the same for football.
Yeah, I hope so. I think the added element is it's very more similar to baseball because of the travel schedule, right? We're not in a bubble like hockey or basketball. However, we're dealing with significantly large rosters in football in terms of the players of the 53-man roster, and then you're talking at least 20 coaches, right? We got training staffs, we got doctors, we got, maybe scouts coming along. That's a lot to transport. You could have up to maybe 100 personnel people on any given week traveling with the team. And so going city to city, cross country, I think this is going to be a real test for sports in this country of can we do this right? And can we handle what if a couple star players goes down and they're out for 2-3 weeks? How are we going to handle that? How are teams going to handle that going forward?
And also, it seems to be a team-by-team situation, how they're going to handle fans in the stadiums. We already saw the opener with Kansas City, which we'll get to what happened with that game in a little bit, but they had 15,000
about 15,
people. And, it seems like MetLife Stadium, we know with the Jets and Giants, they've said no fans probably for the whole season.
LA as well will not have any fans for the entire season.
And some have said they know at least for the first 2 games there's going to be no fans. So it just seems to be kind of a state-by-state thing, and we'll see how it plays out.
I know. That's kind of what makes it complicated, and I think it's also a just month-by-month and week-by-week basis of kind of the information we're getting from the government, from health professionals of what's safe to kind of bring people back. But it is, I thought I would be more affected when the NBA started, where there was the bubble there, and they're doing artificial crowd noise, there's no fans. And actually, I've really enjoyed the bubble games. And I thought they've been really intense, and I kind of like the backyard kind of feel of it. I don't know how that works in a football stadium where you're normally supposed to have 80,000 people, right? And, when you have the home team and to have that real home field advantage, whether it is in KC or MetLife, where you have fans, screaming first and 10, chanting defense, How is that going to work when everything is speaker related and it's artificial, or it's very sparse in the fans? It was weird, sort of, in Kansas City on Thursday night. You definitely heard the fans. Yeah. They made some impact, but I don't think you're going to have the impact of a Seattle normally, where you're causing opposing teams to have, false starts constantly. Like, we are not, I don't think, going to see that here in the 2020 season.
I think it's a good point, too. Like, football, I think, is the sport where you're going to feel the absence of the fans more than anything else, because the stadiums are so vast. I mean, we're used to seeing, like you said, 75, 80,000 people.
It's sad.
And,
it really is.
And like you said, places like that have that distinct home field advantage, like Seattle. They thrive off that. They feed off that.
I mean, the 12th man is one of the biggest selling jerseys in the NFL.
Sure.
And, now you don't have that element. I don't know Seattle's procedures, particularly in the state of Washington, so you can let us know down below. I don't know if I didn't see if they're letting in fans, or like some or a little bit there. But either way, it will not be the same. So that was a necessary thing we had to talk about given the pandemic going on. But let's go more to the football personnel side of it. Talking a little bit about the draft and some of these free agent moves that have kind of changed the landscape of the NFL season going forward. The highlighting one, you would say, obviously, is Tom Brady, right? I mean, that's kind of where you have to start. That's changed the entire dynamic of, you would say, two conferences.
Sure.
So what were your feelings on kind of the move? Did you think it was right for Tom? And what do you think it's going to be for the Bucs going forward?
Well, I think it is right, mainly because it's a good spot for him, because you look at that offense and they just have so much talent.
Loaded.
It's absolutely loaded. And, last year it really felt like things got stale in New England. It seemed like Brady just did not look like the same player that we'd become accustomed to year in, year out. And the Patriots just folded at the end of the year. You think back to that Week 17 game losing to Miami.
They lost the 2 seed because of that.
Right, and then they went into the playoffs and clearly just didn't have any steam. They got beaten by the Tennessee Titans, who handled that game.
Ugly. Really ugly game.
And so you just got the sense that change was needed. Now, I'm sure nobody really expected it was going to be Cam Newton to go and take his place.
Some people thought maybe, but I don't know how I feel about how it's going to work
I don't either. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. But back to Brady, I just think it's a good position for him to thrive, even with him being the age he is now, getting up to, 43, 44? Yeah. But the talent that they have, those two receivers, we know Mike Evans is now dealing with a little bit of an injury, is a question mark for Week 1 against the Saints, but Chris Godwin...
He's a beast.
Yeah.
I mean, an absolute beast. He proved that last year, and I would even say the year before, arguably, that he can be a number one and definitely a number two in that offense. You got really 3 tight ends on there, right? With Howard and Brate and Gronk. Now, Gronk, what a move. I'm not going to lie, that surprised me. I really thought he was... I know there had been rumblings, maybe he'll come back to New England when Tom was still there. I thought he was done given his injury history and how successful he has been outside of football. So for him to come back after taking a year off, I was surprised, were you?
I really was, and I'm fascinated to see how he's going to do. Is he going to be a focal point in the offense?
There's no way.
We're used to seeing him being a dominant player when he was with the Patriots. I have to believe he still has something left in the tank. He has had a lot of injuries, but it's not like he's upper 30s. He's still young enough, and he has that familiarity and chemistry with Brady. I still think he's going to have to make some sort of an impact.
I definitely think he'll make an impact, but I would say that even though he's in his, his lower 30s, he more has the body of closer to a 40-year-old.
Right, all the concussions.
And the forearm, I mean, that one, I was watching them do practice the other day when they were doing the mic up, and he's still wearing that sleeve, which is going to be a full-on brace on that forearm during games. He's had that. He's had knee issues. He's had back issues. To me, he's someone that can definitely make an impact. I'm not going to discount that because he's Gronk, he's high energy, he's incredibly strong, he's got deceptive speed. I like all that stuff. But he's a goal line player for me. I don't think he's making 16 games. I think he's going to be used very... almost like when you have a player kind of in the twilight of their career being like a third down situational pass rusher. I think he will be that when, hey, we need a touchdown. Hey, we're inside, the red zone here. Gronk, go to work. And I think that's where he'll fit in. The other 2 tight ends will kind of be in the, 20-yard in the sticks. They'll be doing that.
Right. And then the other move, don't forget about, is they just made bringing in Leonard Fournette out of the backfield.
Was a little shocking.
It's a little disappointing, kind of up and down his years in Jacksonville, but a very high
It is Jacksonville, though. So he still put up incredible numbers last year.
And, I mean, you have to believe he's going to give the team some
Yeah.
balance and be able to run the football there. And they've really needed kind of a bell cow back there.
There's really been no one there since what,
Doug Martin
or Barber.
Yeah.
I go back to. I mean, Doug Martin had the 1 year, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then he had some off the field and personnel issues, and that was that. But when they brought in Shady McCoy, I thought, okay, like, we're going to do a by committee thing. Shady has experience. Totally makes sense. And so to bring in Fournette, I was like, are they cutting McCoy? They so far have not cut him, as far as I know.
It's a pretty crowded
backfield. I guess we're going to go with a 4 or 5 man kind of very crowded backfield here. And Fournette should be the focal point. Remember, he's only 25.
Yeah.
It was only a couple, 2-3 years ago, he was taken with the 4th overall pick.
Yep.
And so this guy, I think, has a lot of talent left in him. I just think he was in a very unfortunate situation in Jacksonville, which, I mean, we could talk about the exodus of players that have happened in that place. And they're clearly tanking for Trevor over there.
Yeah.
But I think the Bucs are very fascinating, and I know I'm more in the middle on them. I think a lot of people are high, like, this is Super Bowl bust.
Right.
It's going to be
a lot of that.
The first team playing in, their home stadium, because, the Super Bowl will be played in Raymond James Stadium. And then there's other people going, oh, they're not making the playoffs. And I fall in the line of, I could see a 10-6, 11-5, and they fight divisional conference. I don't know if they go all the way, because this is brand new. There's a lot of new pieces on that team.
I agree. And the other interesting thing is how Bruce Arians is going to handle all these personalities. A guy who's always known for throwing the football and having some of the better passing offenses. You think about all he did with Carson Palmer in Arizona.
What a season that was.
So I think he's the right guy to run this offense, and it'll be very interesting to see.
I always think about when he took over with the Colts, and he won Coach of the Year there, and the fantastic job he did. He worked with Ben Roethlisberger when he was with the Steelers as the OC. So I think he's the perfect coach to manage those personalities.
Yeah.
And going into your second year with a franchise, you definitely have more, comfortability, which I think is important. Todd Bowles, his second year as defensive coordinator, I think very important there. And I think in saying that defense is underrated. I mean, there is some killers on that defense, especially at the linebacker position. They could be really talented.
Levante David for sure comes to mind. So yeah, I mean they're going to be one of the teams to watch. You look at Week 1, them playing the Saints. That's one of the games for sure to highlight.
Oh, definitely. How do you feel about some of these other off-season kind of moves that have happened around the league? And one, we'll highlight here, if you didn't know, I'm a Los Angeles Rams fan. Brian is a New York Jets fan. So we will definitely, Dylan's in the background there cheering, we will definitely highlight those two teams, probably given week to week. And in saying that, I never got your thoughts on how you felt last season and into the offseason, the Todd Gurley situation. What did you feel like happened there? What went wrong? And does he have anything left in the tank in Atlanta?
Yeah, well, I mean, you, of course, can speak better to this than me, all that you've done to watch him. But, this was a guy who was clearly the bell cow back there.
It was incredible.
Big reason for their success. I mean, everything ran through Gurley. I think it made Goff a lot better. He was really effective off play action using those receivers that he had.
100%.
But then, I mean, I guess it was just injuries. He was dealing with the bad knees and different issues and just did not look like the same player we saw in the playoffs when they made that run.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a big part of it, that NFC Championship game against the Saints, the Super Bowl. So I don't really know. I mean, I have to believe he still has something left in the tank. I think the Rams, though, just figured that was the end, and now Atlanta picks him up, another team that has a lot of talent, skill position,
a lot of talent, but that has not lived up to what Dan Quinn has kind of set out over there.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, we know they blew their big opportunity in the Super Bowl, the 28.
And they really have never recovered since then.
They really haven't. I think it's taken a huge mental toll on them. But I mean, you obviously watching the Rams every week and seeing Gurley up close. Was it the injuries? Was there something more there that it just kind of fizzled?
I think the problem started when he got that big contract, right? He got signed to, I think at the time, it was the highest contract that had ever been given to a running back, and then Ezekiel Elliott broke that. But I think that started where when things came out later, when it started going downhill for Gurley, he was apparently not a great person in the locker room. He wasn't the same person. He wasn't the same leader as what a lot of the reports. Obviously, I was not there.
Yeah.
But from when you read all of these stories of what went on behind the scenes, that's what seems to be the problem. Almost like he was content on the money he got. he was expecting a certain amount of touches or, I don't know, kind of almost celebrity status, right? You've seen him in all these commercials, all these things, and I think he expected a lot that wasn't afforded to him, and what his knees could not uphold, kind of his end of the bargain. And we've seen that toward the end of the season when they rested him in the final 2 games in the 2018 season. And we were like, okay, we'll rest him for the playoffs. He had a lot of miles, on those tires. And now you go into the playoffs. He has that great game against Dallas as well as CJ Anderson. But you have to remember, there was not a lot of carries for really either back in that divisional round game there in the Coliseum. There were just wide open lanes by the offensive line and poor tackling by Dallas that allowed him to do that. Then you come back in the championship game, which, whatever controversy we won't talk about here, of when they played the Saints, he did absolutely nothing. Really, the run game didn't do much. And then the Super Bowl, that spoke for itself. And that next year of being last year in 2019, I think that was our Super Bowl hangover. I don't think the team necessarily had a Super Bowl hangover. I think the situation around Todd created a Super Bowl hangover. And I love Todd for all the years and all the, the yards and the great moments that he gave to the franchise and really upstarting the Rams back in LA.
Yeah.
But there was a clear problem in the locker room. There was a clear disconnect with the coaches were going on. McVay is coming out and saying like, oh, I'm an idiot for not using him. That he was just taking the blame on himself of the explanation of why he wasn't being used. And I think it more that this team and these doctors, they knew he couldn't handle it. Reports came out before the 2019 season that, his knee, he was basically had arthritis in it. And that was the beginning and the end. And I think it was the right move instead of week to week of wondering, hey, why he only had 7, catches, 7 touches. Let's just cut it. Let's cut our losses. It didn't work out, and we wish him the best. I think it was the right move.
And it's not just Gurley. You've seen your team make a host of changes in the offseason. They're going to look a lot different, especially offensively. Brandon Cooks was traded to Houston. So you think this offense can still produce at a decent enough level?
I think they can because I really believe in what Sean McVay does.
Yeah.
And I believe in the scheme that he has. And I really like down the stretch when he was going definitely away from Gurley. He started going out with these 2 tight end formations where he, instead of, we ran the most triple wide receivers, kind of personnel 11 look in the entire league, the highest percentage. So going more to Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee, who burst onto the scene at the end of the last 6 games, I think is the way to go. And in camp this year and on Hard Knocks, they have been talking about a wide receiver, Van Jefferson, who I'm also a Florida Gators fan, went there. He was a nice little selection for them that I think is really going to fill in there. I'm interested to see what Cam Akers does, the 2nd round pick out of Florida State there in the backfield. I think there's enough weapons. I think more of the question is on, can Goff handle it? Because he did not have a particularly good year last year.
Right.
And is this defense going to hold up without Wade Phillips? And a lot of holes, particularly Corey Littleton going to the Raiders.
And the pressure's on Goff after he got that huge contract.
Yes.
I mean, they're paying him as if he's an upper echelon quarterback, and he's shown it in flashes. But you said last year he just wasn't very good. This is a big year now for him to prove himself.
Yeah, 22 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. He also had a number of fumbles, something insane, like 12 or 14 fumbles.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. It just doesn't go on him. The offensive line was consistently every week ranked either 30th to 32nd. There was a ton of injuries on that offensive line last year. The Rams have pretty much brought people back healthy. They haven't made too many additions. Pretty much their addition was, bringing back their left tackle and Whitworth there and convincing him not to retire. But how much does he have really left at 38 years old? I think the key kind of off-season move to highlight with the Rams and for the Raiders was Littleton leaving. That was a gigantic loss on that defense. Kind of almost our captain, really, and a guy who just flew sideline to sideline. And now him going over to hang out with John Gruden in Las Vegas. I think that was a huge pickup for them.
And news just today with the Rams, them locking up Cooper Kupp to an extension.
Yes. And they just locked up Jalen Ramsey recently. I don't know where we're pouring all of this money out of. Where it's so against the cap, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
So I have no idea where Stan Kroenke is, the owner is getting this money or how this is working. Because you have to remember a quick tidbit for the coronavirus. They're estimating that the cap goes down $20 million next year. So it's going to be tight for every team. So I trust in the GM Les Snead that he knows what he's doing there. But how how are they getting off of the Rams?
Yeah.
What's other offseason moves around the league that you want to highlight? Anything that's caught your eye?
Yeah, one that kind of stuck out to me was kind of a polarizing player, the wide receiver Stephon Diggs from Minnesota.
Yes,
and,
big move.
Him getting traded to the Buffalo Bills. And we had heard a lot about kind of an unhappiness between him and that team over the last couple of years, which is kind of surprising because his production was a little bit inconsistent at times.
He got nicked up in some injuries.
Right, but you think about the Minneapolis Miracle, one of the great plays in franchise history, and this was a big playmaker for that team and for Kirk Cousins, and to just jettison him and for Buffalo to get him, I think is a big gain for a young quarterback who's trying to take the next step. And I think he's going to make an impact for the Bills. We know that's a team that has a really good defense. Last year, they took steps forward. They made the playoffs. That playoff game was an ugly one against Houston.
It was not a good look.
But I'm really interested to see what he does in his new spot. And Josh Allen likes to throw the deep ball. Diggs can get deep. I think he could really be a big weapon for that team.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I will say with that playoff game, it was ugly for both sides. I mean, the Bills get out to that lead, that kind of tip touchdown to himself there with Josh Allen. That was a really odd game. More spoke to the greatness of Deshaun Watson, but we can talk about that later. I think Diggs is a good fit. I think this was one of those necessary divorces.
Yeah.
Clearly, he was not happy with Zimmer over there. He was not happy with his offensive staff, even when Kevin Stefanski, who's now the new coach of the Cleveland Browns, I don't think he was happy of how he was integrated into that offense. We had the whole thing where, remember, the receivers were yelling at Kirk Cousins last year, and then he blamed it, took it on himself, and that kind of propelled that team going forward until that upset win in the wildcard game against the Saints. But it was needed. Buffalo needed some kind of infusion of talent on their offense, particularly at the wide receiver position. You need someone in Josh Allen who has an incredible arm over there. There's no one getting down the field. And so you needed someone to fill into that spot, a perennial number one. And if Diggs can get his attitude in check, and sometimes a new kind of scene, we've seen that before, a new city, a new team can do that for you. And being the unquestioned number one, I think could really help that offense.
When I watch Josh Allen, one guy he reminds me of, and I'm curious to see if you agree with this, is Jay Cutler.
I was literally thinking the same name.
How about that? That gunslinger mentality, always looking to make the play downfield, but very much mistake prone.
Very mistake prone and very inconsistent, and can always be kind of counted on for just a really ill-timed interception.
That is funny. I did not think you were going to be right on
literally
the same
thinking
page.
The exact same thing. That's what I was thinking.
I thought about that earlier today, too.
Yeah. So I hope, obviously, Josh Allen has way more athletic ability than Jay Cutler ever did. Because
run the ball.
Yeah, he has the most rushing touchdowns since he entered the league in 2018, even more than Lamar Jackson. I think it's 17 rushing touchdowns. But he needed some help on that offense. On the flip side of it, to the Viking side.
Yeah.
I think it was necessary. It was more of an addition by subtraction kind of old adage. I'm interested in two parts. One, can Adam Thielen stay healthy and step up for this team now that you're number one? I love Adam Thielen. I loved him even before he became a thing. I was like, this guy is something. Kind of how I saw Cooper Kupp when he got drafted.
Yeah.
I love that pick out of Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
When we took him in, I think that was the third round. He has to step up and stay healthy because he struggled a lot with injury issues last year. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is what they spent that first round pick on, Justin Jefferson. You were picked. You were on one of the greatest college teams maybe ever. Can you step up into that role? Because we've seen Minnesota go to the first round before at wide receiver.
And not work
and
out.
It is not work.
Laquan Treadwell.
Yes. So it is not. Is he in Atlanta now? Where even is? Or is he still with the Vikings? I'm going to look that up. So what do you think of the Vikings' outlook at the side of this?
Well, one thing that I think, and you bring up the receiver taking Diggs' place, but I think that move signals that they're going more run heavy now. And I think they're going to rely more heavily on Dalvin Cook.
And Madison they have in the backfield too, though, right?
It's a really nice 1-2 punch. And Cook, really, it was a breakthrough season for him last year. I think
definitely.
His third year in the league. And
he did sign with the Falcons, and then September 5th got released, so I think he's a free agent right now.
Okay, so you talk about a first-round pick that just has
it's
not
just
gone
been
well.
Bad.
But I just think Minnesota's going to go more run-heavy now and really use Cook. We saw Cook, in addition to Alvin Kamara, just today, news coming that both were locked up to big contract extensions. So they're clearly committed to him. And the thing is, he's two ways out of the backfield. They use him equally as much.
Oh, he's
as
incredibly
a receiver,
versatile.
right?
Incredibly.
So he's a huge weapon. And this Viking team, the last few years, to me, they have been talented enough to be a Super Bowl team.
Oh, 100%. It goes back to that quarterback position. It goes back to that quarterback position. I don't believe I like Kirk Cousins. He can't get them over the hump.
Well, they gave him a ton of money, so they better hope that he's the guy. But yeah, the jury's still out on that. And I just think they've been talented enough, but it's just been a letdown. Last year, they had the big playoff win. They were riding high, beating the Saints in the Dome. Mm-hmm. Then they go to San Francisco and just didn't look like they even matched up with the 49ers.
No, so. It was. I mean, the 49ers made fools out of really the entire NFC in their playoffs. But yeah, they're a team that every single year I look at them and go, man, there is so much talent all over the ball, especially on defense.
Yep.
And you could pencil them in every year. 10-6, they're going to be wild card, or maybe they'll win the division in a Green Bay down year, and they will be out the first game they play. They just do not have it, and Kirk Cousins consistently, I think he's something insane, like 6-22 or something in primetime games. It's something crazy like that. You can correct me if I'm wrong down below, but he has to step up because they're getting to, I believe this is his third year, right, on that 3-year contract. They're in a position of, they're not going to be bad where they're going to be able to pick one of these assumed projected top prospects, college quarterbacks next year. What are they going to do? Are they going to re-sign him to another guaranteed contract if he doesn't deliver again? I think they're in a real interesting spot and a turning point here in 2020.
Yeah, and I think the same goes for the head coach, Mike Zimmer, who has consistently done a good job with that team, but the inability to make that deep postseason run may eventually wear thin where they wind up making a coaching change at the top as well.
Yeah, he is kind of a below-the-radar pick for me of being on the hot seat. Mm-hmm. I really think he is in kind of that bubbling water, but he's not red hot yet. But he's going to get there if this team definitely doesn't make the playoffs and doesn't show up once again. They're going to change a lot of pieces there, I think, next season. Some other offseason moves that I wanted to look at particularly is I want to know what you think about what's going on with the Washington football team these days.
Oh, boy.
I mean, like, there's not much to talk about, like, personnel-wise, but just the overall culture, what has happened to them with the whole logo thing, and how you felt about now the issue of maybe the sexual misconduct scandal that poor Ron Rivera, who is not there for any of this, is now the new head coach, and he's stepping into the spotlight of just a mess that's been left there.
I was just going to use that word mess, too, and I think you throw in, too, with Rivera, he's dealing with his own health issues,
I know.
too. So
sad.
It's a lot going on with that team. It's really unfortunate. I kind of thought there would be a new team name sooner. I did not think they would play this whole season going by the Washington football team.
It's a little ridiculous. I agree that they should have gotten rid of the Redskins name.
Oh, sure.
But you guys should have known this was kind of coming. People have been trying to get this for a while. You didn't have anything in the file room. Anything better to prepare for a trademark?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the first announcer call of touchdown Washington football team.
Yeah,
like,
so many people are going to say Redskins throughout the year and then immediately correct themselves. You know that's going to happen.
I already saw once on a show the other day, so you expect that. But yeah, the culture, it just has been toxic. I mean, I think that's the best way to describe
it. Through and through.
And the on-the-field results have been poor, to say the least. It's been that way for a long time. I think it's been festering within that organization, and I think it just kind of came to a head this offseason now with all the changes they made. And hopefully, they establish a new culture once they get a new team name there, and they can kind of turn things around on the field. Maybe Chase Young will be the building block they need on
Very
defense.
Interesting player to pay attention to.
So, this year I think you'd expect another long year for that team, but you hope that better times are around the corner for that organization.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it sucks, someone who prides themselves on learning about the history of the NFL and seeing how fantastic they were in the 80s, and kind of a staple for the league, with the Hogs on offensive line and winning 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. Yeah. I mean, things you're never probably going to see. And you're in the nation's capital, you're the heart, of the country, at least, our capital-wise, and to be this bad for this long. And it roots back to Daniel Snyder, the owner of that team. He is just not taking accountability for a lot of things. He's been too meddling on the personnel side. They've made some really poor decisions in the front office and with coaches. And now I really like the Ron Rivera hire, but it's contingent on can he stay healthy himself, and the best wishes out to him and obviously his family. But also, Dwayne Haskins for me is not the answer. He just isn't. He's not the answer, and that is not the way to go there. And I think they are in for a very long season where they're going to kind of be trapped going into the third year next year of him. Of do we cut our losses already? Or do we try to get one of these top picks?
Well, that's the thing. When you take a first-round quarterback and it doesn't work, it cripples you as a franchise for years to come. But speaking of quarterbacks on that team, I think we have to mention the incredible story of Alex Smith somehow making a comeback after that.
Insane.
I mean, what was a life-threatening injury at one point. It got that bad. And for him to make his way back on the field and make this roster as the backup or third-string quarterback, I think just speaks to incredible determination on his part. And it would be great to see him get back on the field.
Oh, absolutely. Determination of his part, his family, and that team doctors, that staff, of what they did to rehabilitate him. Now, personally, if that was me, I would go, hey, listen, I love football. There's definitely a place of me, probably as a coach or some kind of, announcer or something like that. I'm never risking myself again after such a traumatic injury. But hey, props to him that he wants to get out there. I 100% support him. He feels like a safer pick over there in Washington, but at the age he is and the injury risk that he could potentially be, they're in kind of a lame duck situation of what they're doing at quarterback. I don't think there's a ton of talent on that offense particularly.
Look at running back. They got rid of Adrian Peterson.
Which I did not agree with, like why they cut him there. Only, about a week and a half ago or so. I didn't agree with that pick at all. They have that, blanking on the name, but they have that interesting wide receiver that they have going on there. McLaurin, He's kind of the only person I like on that entire team because I do not trust Jordan Reed at tight end to even remotely stay healthy. And then defensive-wise, you look at Chase Young, there's a pretty decent defensive line there. That back end, in my opinion, it's not good. It's not good at all. It hasn't been good for a while. And they're going to be definitely a floundering team, I would per se. Brian, we could talk about the offseason, I would say, all day. But since you're a Jets fan, I got to know what you think about Jamal Adams. And what happened there? Do you think it was a good haul for the Jets? We gotta know your thoughts.
Well, I think it was a good haul, and I just don't think the team had too much of a choice because the relationship there clearly had soured. I think it was a long time coming. I mean, we had heard this probably starting from his rookie year. I mean, once he started to realize how good of a player he was, which we know he doesn't doubt, in self-confidence.
He definitely doesn't doubt that part.
He just seemed like he had a ticket out of town and was ready to move on to his next destination. We had thought for years it was going to be the Dallas Cowboys. He seemed like he already had made up his mind he was going there.
He literally told them, hey, come get me. Remember when he said that to Jason Garrett?
But, that's not how it works in the sports world and in life. But I think he did find a pretty good landing spot, it'd be safe to say, in Seattle, a team that has been really good now for the last number of years, decade really, and Pete Carroll's just done a great job. So a big boost for that defense and for the Jets to get a number of draft picks, to get a first round pick back in return, and to get another safety at least to replace him.
McDougal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, it's tough to say goodbye to a player as talented as he is, but I just don't think there was much of a choice given that the relationship, he just wasn't happy there, and so they weren't going to sign him to a big extension.
Yeah, I tend to agree, definitely. I think I'm more on the side that in the situation that they ended up being in, it was totally right to move on from him. They got a huge haul in the Jets.
Yeah.
They should have signed him before that. And that should have never been an issue. He's clearly one of your most talented players. He's not just a good Pro Bowl level defensive player. He's like all-time talent the way he has been producing. The way he can cover, the way he could drop down in the box as a linebacker, the way he rushes the passer is completely underrated. And the amount of plays that he affects in the sideline-to-sideline game he has there, making everyone better. And I think it starts with, I never agreed with the Adam Gase hire over there. He's clearly distanced himself from many of the star players, even though him and Bell sort of are on good terms now. That goes back
to his days in Miami.
Yeah, I didn't like that hire all the way up to his very bizarre introductory press conference, which everyone could remember.
The eyes.
Oh, God, what was happening with that press conference? But Jamal Adams, when you didn't sign him then a year or two ago, you got to this situation. Yeah, it was time to move on. It was a great haul that the Jets ended up getting, which is something in past trades you couldn't say. So I think they did a fantastic job over there in the front office. And on the Seattle side of it, I'm not as high on him. I think it's a great job of getting Jamal Adams, but for what they gave up, and for feels like this is you're swinging for the fences kind of old adage here. Because that defense in Seattle, as being a Rams fan and knowing that division very well, it's not good. It's not what it was.
It's not the Legion of Boom.
No, that offense carries that team now. It is no longer a defensive team. And there's some players there. Griffin, the other Griffin brother got cut now. But, Griffin's there, and obviously Bobby Wagner. There's some players there. But they are not what they were. And you're trusting him to shore up that entire secondary. That's a lot of pressure on him for someone who has had injuries before. And things go south. I don't care if you're even on Seattle. Is that culture, is Pete Carroll and is Russell Wilson, are they strong enough to rein that in? They weren't strong enough to rein it in with Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor.
Yeah.
Are they going to keep him in check? I understand that Russell Wilson is a way better leader now. It is clearly his franchise when it was the defensive players franchise before.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to be for Seattle's outlook here in 2020?
Yeah, well, I think that's true. When they won the Super Bowl and went to back-to-back, the identity of the team was that defense.
Yeah.
You think about the Legion of Boom, all the plays that they made. The offense was serviceable. They did a great job running the football, kind of controlling time of possession, but it was the defense that struck fear in the opposition. Yeah. And look what they did to that Denver team, which broke records that year.
A massacre.
Peyton Manning's season was through the roof at 55 touchdown passes, and they made mincemeat of them.
Opening play, the game was over.
The big hit, the first play was the safety.
Yeah.
But I think early on, too, there was a big hit by Cam Chancellor on Demaryius Thomas, which, set the tone.
Well, that set the tone 100%. Yeah. But it was that was a rout. That was one of the worst Super Bowls ever watched.
43-8 final.
Yeah. And then from where they've moved from that and kind of piece by piece losing those defensive players, Russell Wilson becoming, which it is a disgrace, and I will say it even as a Rams fan, that this man has never gotten a single MVP vote ever since he's been playing.
Is that true? Not one.
That's a joke. That no one recognizes that Russell Wilson hasn't gotten at least one. If you're an MVP voter out there, shame on you, because that is a terrible, terrible choice that you have not given this man one vote.
You talk about a guy that when you watch him, he just is a magician with the ball.
It's incredible.
Some of the plays he makes where he's holding the ball for sometimes 10, 15 seconds and running all over the place. And that's when he's at his most dangerous, making plays down the field. But he's a guy that elevates the players around him, that he's made a guy like Tyler Lockett what he is now.
Yeah, I know.
And look, Doug Baldwin, the career that he had as an undrafted player.
I know.
Jermaine Kearse as well. So he's a guy who's just made players better.
And now they have DK Metcalf over there too, which is a crazy infusion of talent.
Big body and looks like he could be the real deal.
Yeah. I really like what they're doing offensively outside that offensive line, because it still really is a work in progress there. And I believe they would have beat Green Bay last year if their running backs were not decimated by the time they played Green Bay.
Green Bay, that's another story. To me, they just have not been that special. Last year, they were 13-3, and you didn't watch them and think they were all that good.
No.
And they just got completely exposed.
Well, remember, they had some kind of crazy record in one-score games.
Yeah.
It was like something you'll never replicate.
And then you get matched up against the NFC elite in the championship game, and we saw what happened.
I mean,
with the 49ers.
That game, I remember tweeting about it. I said there was very few times I call a game by halftime. I said those players should not come back on the field for the second half, because there was absolutely no point to play the rest of that game.
And the Packers made it look a little better by scoring a couple late touchdowns, but the game at that point...
That's called, Brian, garbage time touchdowns. Where that was a disgrace.
I'm with you.
For there. But Seattle's going to be interesting here, I would see, going forward. I want to see how Pete Carroll kind of meshes with this. He feels like he's always evolving there in what that team's identity is. And if they go are they going to go more an air attack with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, or are they going to stay back to Chris Carson, ground and pound, maybe a mix of both?
Yeah.
I want to see kind of where that goes there.
I think I would expect them to be pretty balanced, having players both ways. You can run the ball, pass the ball, but when you have Russell Wilson, you got to take advantage of your biggest strength. They're going to throw it a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Since we're doing pretty good on time, actually, you touched on it. What'd you feel about Green Bay and the thing we have to highlight is drafting Jordan Love there in the first round. I believe it was the 26th overall pick. How do you feel about? Do you feel like that was a really kind of stabbing in the back move to Rodgers? Did you feel like, hey, we need to prepare kind of the future here? And was Jordan Love, is he that guy? Is he going to be the guy going forward?
Well, I think that's a great question. You're someone who likes to look at the draft prospects a lot more than me, watches tape, watches them in college. So I can't say I know a lot about what Love did as a collegiate, but the Packers' decision to me comes down to, they have to find the replacement for Rodgers. You reach a point when your franchise guy is getting up there in age, like Rodgers is now 35, whatever it might be
35,
now.
36.
35, 36.
Yeah.
And we've started to see some slippage in his game.
In the last 3 years, I would say, or
right.
so.
I mean, there was a time where he was clearly the best player in the game, and obviously he's still a Hall of Fame caliber player and great to watch, but I don't think he's been quite the same guy. I think the talent around him has kind of fallen off. You think about when they were at their height, the receivers that he had around him with Greg Jennings and Donald Driver, Randall Cobb, all those kind of guys, that offense was just so fun to watch.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't quite been the same lately.
Yeah, and that speaks to the front office of Green Bay as they've let him down. Let's just be honest. This guy is an all-time talent.
Yeah.
He's holding the record for, QB rating and QBRs and everything that he's done. And to have a situation where I go into the season and I go, okay, you have Devontae Adams, who is injury-prone. You have Aaron Jones. Is he a superstar? He kind of had one good year. And that's it.
Right.
And there's no one else to look for on that offense. They have wholeheartedly, as you said, let him down time and time again. And it's not even like they went, hey, Aaron, we need you to be a magician offense, but that defense is amazing. The defense is lackluster. It has not been good for years.
And it's a team that consistently doesn't spend in free agency.
I know, because it's also not a big free agent destination. Who wants to freeze in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
So that's a hard sell to a free agent.
So offensively, they've gotten most of their weapons through the draft, and typically not in high spots. They found some late round gems, but yeah, I mean, he needs help around him, and it just hasn't been there in recent years.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that they go Jordan Love, which I had a feeling they were going to go, and that they didn't get him one wide receiver for the entirety of the draft. It's not like they made big free agent moves for it, and not a single draft pick, not second round. And this was a very deep wide receiver class here for the draft. Nothing. I think that is almost like, hey, we believe we're moving on from you. And on top of that, while you're here, we're asking you to do everything, including mentor your future successor.
You don't want to say that they're sabotaging him, but it almost comes across that way.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think that's what they're doing, but they're transitioning away from him and not subtle at all. Like, they're outright just blatant out there.
And I think the other factor, too, is it's no secret the relationship between him and that organization has not been good.
It's been prickly, to say the least.
Prickly, to say the least. With Mike McCarthy, things had really soured. There was no choice but to make the coaching change, and now Matt LaFleur was tasked. I mean, he's a guy who's a big personality. I think he can be difficult to deal with. And, we've kind of seen it lately.
No, I agree with that. And we're going to see a lot this season how Rodgers does with, McFleur here in the second season and what McCarthy does there in Dallas.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big test to kind of settle the argument of who was more at fault here. It's not going to, there's obviously a lot of other factors, but in kind of a virtuose, signaling thing, it'll kind of be like that. Green Bay is a fascinating team this year. I still think they can win the division because I trust Rodgers more than Kirk Cousins. I just think they're not making any deep runs in the playoffs yet again. And there's no way they're going 13-3. That was kind of just a lucky, one-score game thing. And to draft Jordan Love, how do you feel about that? Take him 26th overall out of Utah State.
Yeah.
He wasn't anything. I pulled up his college stats here. This is what Green Bay was looking at. The 2018 year. That year, he passed for over 3,500 yards. He had about 8.6 a throw he was looking at, and he was 32 touchdowns to 6 picks. That's what they're banking on. 64 completion percentage, that's what they're banking on. But when he lost some talent, and the team struggled, and they went through some coaching changes, which, yes, coaching does matter, the next year, he goes 3,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, 17 picks, 61% completion rate.
Big drop.
So there was a lot of drop there, particularly in the turnovers rate. And coaching is definitely a factor. That stuff matters. It changes culture. It can affect players, especially in college. But I don't know, as almost a one-year wonder he has incredible arm talent. He could throw the heck out of the ball.
Yeah.
But is this the guy?
Well, I think they're hoping that that's the case. I mean, when you take a guy in the first round, they're hoping he's the heir apparent to Rodgers. And
they're hoping the Rodgers-Favre situation. That's what they're banking on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it would be pretty hard
That's
to
a 1 in a
that.
million shot that's something like that you're going to get 3 Hall of Famers in a row.
Just like what the Colts had with Peyton Manning going to Andrew Luck after they got the first overall
Which is
pick.
unfortunate there, but it would have been great. But the reports out of camp, Brian, have been Love has not looked good. He's not looked good. And yes, he's a rookie. I would imagine there is almost no way he starts this year unless Rodgers gets hurt. Yeah. Or maybe it's a very Chiefs, a la Chiefs, where they're in the playoffs already. They start him the last game of the season, very much what they did with the Mahomes and Alex Smith thing. But I think there's at least, with the contract you gave Rodgers, he's doing this season and next season. And then maybe you think about moving off for him.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way they'll go. You have to think Rodgers he's going to play this year, probably next year, and then you see maybe if you make the change at that point.
Yeah. All right, guys. We're going to transition, unless you have any more things you want to highlight off-season-wise.
Oh, I think we covered all.
I think we did pretty well. We'll probably touch on some things as we go. We're going to go through game by game. We're going to start off with the game that has already been played, which was Texans at Chiefs. We highlighted that earlier. There was about 15,000 or so fans in the stands there. That's what Kansas City in the state of Missouri is doing. The Chiefs, I would say, I don't think it's unfair to say they resoundingly won. I mean, that game wasn't close, right? They went on a 31-point unanswered run. The Texans did not look prepared to play. And let's be honest, man. This Houston Texans team, there's some players on here, it's particularly Deshaun Watson, that are great. This is not a talented team, and they're not going anywhere.
Well, it starts. We'll bring up this offseason move now because it was a polarizing one, to say the least, when they decided to trade franchise wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nobody felt it made any sense. And yes, they get David Johnson back, who looked pretty good. He had a touchdown
looked good,
run.
but he also got dinged up a little bit on the wrist. Then he came back in the game. Do you really trust him to stay healthy and be what he was?
And it leaves you with a huge hole at wide receiver. You're asking a lot of a guy like Will Fuller, who's had his own struggles of staying on the field, inconsistencies. He's a home run threat, but
and he had a good night.
Yeah. But, hasn't done it consistently. When I looked at this game, you mentioned it was kind of a rollover, which is fair to say, and I don't even think the Chiefs' offense clicked on all cylinders by any stretch.
Absolutely not. They went on that 31-point run unanswered, as I mentioned, but Mahomes didn't have a great night. I'm pulling up the stats right here when I watch the game. 211 yards. He had only 8, incompletions. He had 3 touchdowns. Probably could have had 4, honestly. But there was also several passes he threw in there that could have been interceptions. Yeah. So it wasn't like he was clicking there as well as the receivers. I more point to that running game. And that rookie, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he killed it. He could, if he does this all season now with Damian Williams, who opted out, which we completely understand that, he could add some kind of dynamic presence to this offense, which was already arguably the most explosive in the NFL.
Oh my gosh, the amount of speed that they have on that team. Tyreek Hill at receiver.
It's terrifying as an opposing defense.
And you add him now, a guy that they took with the last pick in the first round. Yep. And as soon as he was picked, all the pundits pointed to his skill set just being a match made in heaven with that offense and what Andy Reid is as a play caller. And boy, was that on full display. I mean, you just saw him exploiting the holes, showing off his speed, had a huge game, over 100 yards on the
138 yards.
Had a touchdown. So, I mean, he looks like another huge piece to the puzzle. And as you said, that offense just looks like it's going to be unstoppable.
I mean, they could hit you anywhere. He's someone who could catch out of the backfield, right? And then you could see him running in between the tackles. He's actually, for a smaller guy, he's deceptively strong. I think he's like 205 or 215, something like that. So he was great around the goal line. You add Robinson, Hardman, Tyreek,
Watkins.
Kelsey, Watkins. I mean, they could beat you crossing routes over the middle. They could beat you post to the outside. They can burn you, obviously, deep. They can now, if they're doing this every week, they can ground and pound you. Mahomes in this game had a 16-play drive. That is the longest drive he's had in his young career. So if they can now bust you over the top in 2 plays, and then they can hit you with the long, methodical drives. I mean, how do you stop this offense?
You pretty much can. And, it's been a work in progress for a while. You think back to when Andy Reid first took over and had Alex Smith at quarterback. And it was a very good team.
They were good, but there was a ceiling.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And when they got Mahomes, you could see the potential the offense had. And they had the big letdown in the AFC title game against the Patriots, a game they probably should have won.
Yeah.
But now, last year and this year, this team has all the pieces now. The offense is unstoppable. There's no other way to say it. Mahomes looks like he could be one of the all-time best, and they're just so fun to watch.
And that defense still, it wasn't fantastic, but it was still good. Chris Jones looked great after his, big contract extension that he got. I have faith in Steve Spagnuolo and what he's doing over there. And I think always an underrated player on that defense is Sorensen. I understand that he's limited in some kind of coverage ability, but I really like his in-the-box kind of safety linebacker. I really do like him commanding that back end. On the other side of it with the Texans, we could talk about this forever, but we won't because we have a limited time here on this show. Bill O'Brien, in my opinion, has made an absolute mess of this franchise. Him being coach and then for some reason giving him GM powers of, you talked on the Hopkins trade, which I thought was bad. Then to kind of replace that, they trade with my LA Rams and get Brandon Cooks, which I was very happy. I love Brandon Cooks, but he's a concussion away from retiring.
Yeah.
So, and he is a quiet night. He goes 2 catches for 20 yards. He didn't really get into the flow of the offense. Randall Cobb had a really quiet night. You paid all that money for him, and he's an older, 32 years old or whatever from the Cowboys, where, he had a decent season, but he was clearly the 3rd, 4th option on that team. Mm-hmm. You add Duke Johnson, David Johnson. What are we doing on this team?
I really don't know. But it's a team that, because of the division they play in, most of the teams in the Bill O'Brien era. Exactly. Right, so the Texans have had their share of division titles. I think they just consistently have been fooling themselves because they have won the division.
That's the best way to put it.
And they've gotten to the playoffs, but they're not a big threat. And you mentioned, when you make a head coach in charge of personnel duties, not everybody's Bill Belichick.
Yeah, no one
exactly.
is Bill Belichick.
So he's the only one who can do that, and I just think you wind up getting shaky decisions made, like you talked about, what they made, and they're kind of an in-between franchise right now. They have a franchise quarterback, clearly Deshaun Watson. We know all that he's capable of.
They just locked him up recently again.
Right. But you just have to wonder what to expect from them in that division.
Yeah, and to me, it always aggravates me when I watch a team and you have a potential all-time talent, an incredibly superstar talent quarterback, and you are wasting his prime years making idiotic personnel decisions, particularly surrounding him with talent. Remember, same team, Bill O'Brien, same coach and GM, that traded 2 first-round picks to the Dolphins for Laramie Tunsil.
Yep.
Because the year before, Watson got killed, had the highest sack record ever. I think he got sacked 56 times, something disgusting. One guy ain't going to solve that. And especially giving 2 first-round picks to a guy that you wouldn't say, oh yeah, Laramie Tunsil, he's a walk-in Hall of Fame player. So I thought that was a poor decision. And that defense goes unheard of in the sense that there is almost next to no Pro Bowl level talent on that defense. J.J. Watt, I love him. I love him as a humanitarian outside of football. He's clearly past his prime years with all the injuries he's had. And while he could still make impact, do I trust people like Whitney Merciless and some of these people on this team to do things? I don't. I don't.
And I think when you have Watt in there, it gives those other players a chance to be impactful. Without the presence of Watt, they're really thin all over the place.
Yeah, and it's just, they've added some interesting pieces there. They went out and they got Vernon Hargreaves III, my old favorite, cornerback over there from the Florida Gators. He kind of fizzled out over there in Tampa Bay. He lands here. Bradley Roby's here. I'm looking at all these just random names of people you see on the field. I don't even know. You guys could correct me down below. Is Kevin Williams, or Kevin Johnson, I think his name was, remember the old
first-round pick
cornerback? Is he even on the team anymore? What I liked his kind of length that he gave to that secondary, and I feel like he's non-existent now. So this team is a mess. It was for me, it was a walkover game. I was so glad to have football back and to have sports kind of back feeling a little bit normal that I didn't even care that this game was basically a snoozer.
Yeah.
Because the Chiefs weren't particularly, amazing, but it was still impressive enough. And the Texans, they were dead on arrival. They were DOA. going said into the Sunday games, which will be tomorrow, recording this on Saturday, as I've said, we have a list of games here, and we could just, we don't have to speak on, everything, for 10 minutes each game, because we're getting about the 55-minute mark here. But let's go through some of these games. So we got the 1 o'clock games of Eagle against the Washington football team. Yeah. Who you got in that game?
I would have to go with the Eagles.
I got the Eagles as well.
I think it'll probably be a little closer than people think, just because those divisional games, especially those two teams, the familiarity with each other, they know each other so well. I expect it to be a closer game, but the Eagles clearly the advantage talent.
I spotlight here. I expect, and I'm calling it now, and I might eat these words, I'm expecting Carson Wentz to stay healthy this year.
That'd be nice.
And to win Comeback Player of the Year. I think he is in position that I don't know if he'll be able to get overall Comeback Player of the Year because he played all of last year. So he's not going to probably qualify for the award. But in the eyes of fans, Comeback Player of the Year of returning to that MVP form of 2017.
My question there is there enough around him? That was something when you watched that team last year, receiver-wise, there just wasn't enough playmakers on that team. I guess they have enough to get the job done, but...
he brought practice squad players to the playoffs. They had a historic rate of injuries on the team. Mm-hmm. I just have to trust that that is not going to happen again. Yes, is there a limit of talent there? Sure, we'll see what Jalen Reagor does that they took there in the first round.
Yeah.
I think he was banged up through camp, but I trust in what Carson Wentz is as a player. I think if they shore up that secondary, which looked a little bit better down the stretch, and I like Doug Peterson. I really do.
I do too. He's already proven himself Super Bowl winner.
100% with a backup quarterback. Yeah. And I think it also helps that division, your only threat in that division is the Cowboys, and usually the Eagles and the Cowboys really go at each other and play each other well. I don't know if they're a perennial Super Bowl team the way they look right now, but I expect them to be kind of in the mix.
And I think Wentz will rely heavily on Zach Ertz, tight end.
Yeah, as he often and always goes to him. Moving on to another 1 o'clock game, the Dolphins at the Patriots. This is an interesting game because normally in the past, right, for the last 20 years, you chalk this up Patriots. They're at home. They have a ridiculous record. I think they only have 5 losses at home in the last 18 years or something like that. And it's the Dolphins who are always seemingly a mess. We're on the other side of it where we now look at the Dolphins who have all of these young mixed with veteran pieces, and the Patriots who had a league-high amount of players opt out. Their Hall of Fame GOAT quarterback has moved on to Tampa Bay. Cam Newton's kind of steps in there. No OTAs, no mini camps, no training camp, no preseason. What are you feeling about this game?
All that said, I still have to go with the Patriots.
Still picking the Patriots?
And, the Dolphins, we know Tua will be the quarterback eventually. How long do you think? I know they're starting with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but Tua, does he take the reins at some point this year?
Yeah. I definitely think he takes the reins, and I will shout out Colin Cowherd actually had a really interesting choice of when he would go about week 9. Because he hits a good run where I think he plays the Jets back-to-back and a few other, Arizona. And so that seems like you set him up for a more feasible run where he's less likely to go against extreme pass rushes to get injured, and you could build up his confidence against lesser teams. So I do think he will get in this year. Because Fitzpatrick he's a holdover, he's a mentor, he ain't the answer.
You know what he is. He's capable of giving you a 4-touchdown effort and then also a 5-interception effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for tomorrow, I'm going with the Patriots. I still think this defense is a really good unit. I'm very secondary especially.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see how Cam Newton's going to do. But the bottom line is Bill Belichick is still coaching this team. They're still going to be fine. I don't think they're going to be double-digit wins, but I'm going to say right now 9-7 for the Patriots. I think that's fair to say, and they'll be right in the mix for a playoff.
Fair enough. I'm more on the 7-9 route of the Patriots. I do believe, I agree with Brian here, they will get the win just because you're talking about a lot of new pieces and moving parts, even though Fitzpatrick has been there on the Dolphins, and until otherwise that they can prove that they can legitimately beat the Patriots. Not some kind of crazy, play where Gronk misses it on that, miracle touchdown, or even Week 17 last year. Week in and week out in season, when you play them 2 times, can you handle this team? And I know Cam Newton is new. I know that offense there's nothing to talk about really on the Patriots offense. There's nothing that scares you there. But I think this is a game in division that Bill knows Brian Flores, who I like a lot, actually,
he
over there.
He did a good job with that team. People thought they were going
After,
0-16.
Yeah, remember the first week?
Yeah.
Remember that with the Ravens game? I mean,
goodness.
it was a joke.
And they played hard, and they won some games that you didn't think they would. Would they go 5-11? Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, so I do think there's potential for them later in the season down the stretch. But here, I could be totally wrong. But until you could prove to me that you could beat the Patriots in Foxborough, I'm picking the Patriots. We'll move on to another 1 o'clock game, Packers and Vikings. For me here, I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to take the Vikings. I'm in Minnesota at home. I know it's not the same home field advantage here, but I love this team's talent more. They have not favored too well in the season series against Aaron Rodgers there, but I need to see what the Packers are this season and how everything kind of is cohesion is there on that offense, and if there is any tension with kind of Love. He's not waiting in the wings because he's probably not going to start this year, but does that cause any problems? And I don't believe that the Packers have enough talent against this defense. And this is a player I wanted to spotlight as an off-season move now that we got to this game. Yannick Ngakoue that they got from the Jaguars.
For their fire sale.
Who was, a steal. Wasn't it something like a 5th-round pick? It was something ridiculous that they got him as part of that fire sale with Jacksonville. He is going to be an underrated player in this defense because, Everson Griffin, gone, right? Out the door. Mm-hmm. Now we need to have a new infusion of pass rush. Do not sleep on this man just because he was in Jacksonville. He is a Pro Bowl perennial All-Pro. He's going to be great, and I think he's going to be hunting Aaron Rodgers all day long.
Well, you mentioned that you think it's a surprise. I don't even think it's a surprise. I think the Vikings are the better team top to bottom.
You taking them?
I'm taking Minnesota.
There we go.
We know Rodgers is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins.
Definitely.
Clearly, Green Bay has the advantage there, but I just like the overall talent base of the Vikings. Talking about the last few years, how we both feel they've been Super Bowl caliber.
Yeah.
And they're a team under Mike Zimmer that has done great at home. And yes, this is a different year, not having fans, but I still think that's one of the better home fields with that beautiful stadium that they have there in Minnesota.
Yes,
so
absolutely beautiful.
I'm with you. I'm taking Minnesota. I think they'll win by about 10 points.
And also important to note, the game is at 1 o'clock, so it's not a primetime game, so usually Cousins does better in those games. Another 1 o'clock game here is Colts at Jacksonville. We don't really have to speak much on this. I'm taking the Colts. Yes, I'm not huge on the Phillip Rivers signing. I think he's pretty much over the hill. He's not at the Eli Manning caliber twilight of his career, and that Eli's retired now, but I think he's kind of getting there. There's some question marks I have on this offense. I did like some of their draft picks. I thought Jonathan Taylor at running back was a really good choice. Michael Pittman out of USC at wide receiver, really like that choice. Picked him up in fantasy. I really think he could be a good player. T.Y. Hilton, kind of getting towards the end there, but that offensive line is arguably still the best in football, and they proved last year they can pound the rock.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think with Jacksonville being an absolute fire sale, I think they have a chance to go 2-14 over in Jacksonville. I like Gardner Minshew, but there is literally no one on that team. I'm taking the Colts.
Yeah, it's been a total fire sale from a Jacksonville standpoint. And the Colts, led by that great offensive line with Quentin Nelson anchoring things at left tackle, is just an absolute beast. I think it's a good bridge quarterback having Phillip Rivers there because we saw last year they were high at times on Jacoby Brissett, but I think
I just never thought he was going to be the guy.
It reached the point where I don't think they did either, and he kind of fizzled the second half of the year. So Rivers, maybe a change of scenery, maybe one last gasp
could ignite that
for him.
fire under him.
38 years old. He's got some good weapons around him. They'll run the ball. I think the Colts will be a serviceable team this year.
I could see them in that 10-6 range.
Yeah, I could too, and I think clearly I'm going with them here in this road affair.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this is by far the best offensive line that's ever protected Phillip Rivers. So he does have that in his advantage, and that's got to help him sleep a little bit easier at night going forward. Another 1 o'clock game is the Bears at Lions. I could have an entire podcast just talking about the atrocity that is the Bears. But what they have done there, they obviously named Mitchell Trubisky to be the starter there. I understand it. I agree with it just because they want to be absolutely sure that is there any way we can prove that this second overall pick isn't an absolute bust. But
and
otherwise,
giving up a king's ransom to get him.
Yeah, it was so dumb. You're at the 3 spot. No one was going to move up ahead of you. I was just talking to my friend about that the other day. But yeah, going with that, the Lions, I think Matt Patricia is on the absolute hot seat. I think he's done after this year. That offense in Detroit was very underrated passing-wise before Matthew Stafford got hurt with the back injury last year. they can definitely throw the ball, but their Achilles heel has been two things. That defense has not been great, and they've gotten rid of quite a few defensive players.
Yeah.
Darius Slay is gone. Remember, also Quandre Diggs went to Seattle in the middle of last year and at the safety spot. So they've gotten rid of a lot of pieces there. And then they've never, it seemingly since Barry Sanders, when has there been a running game on this team?
It's a revolving door. Kerryon Johnson, you hope.
It's just, maybe. So it's been a bad look there. I have been torn on who I want to go with, honestly, in this game. I'm dead serious. I'm going to pick the Bears solely because of Khalil Mack. And I think he can have an impact, and I trust that Bears defense that has a lot more talent than Detroit. But this is going to be a very ugly game with a quarterback with the Bears and Trubisky that I don't think is very great. And then in Matthew Stafford, I like, but there's just no one there. Who's he throwing to? Marvin Jones? That's about it.
Yeah, I'm going with Chicago, too. I swear we haven't planned it.
I know, we've not planned it. We've never talked about it before.
But I'm going with the Bears. I think this game has field goal game written all over it.
Yeah.
Bears winning. And I agree with you. I think the edge is with that defense, the playmakers that they have, Eddie Jackson in the secondary, Khalil Mack.
He's so underrated, man. He's so good.
And I think you have to look back 2 years ago when Matt Nagy took over as the head coach there. That team was really good. They looked like they could be good for years to come. Then it all took a step back last year. Trubisky was not nearly the same player.
No.
I'm kind of looking for him to be better this year. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think they'll be serviceable enough, and I'll take them to win this game tomorrow.
And if he's not the kind of famous backup, the one waiting in the wings, almost in the shadows, as Nick Foles, you know that he's lucky that fans are not in the seats at Soldier Field this year or won't be in the same capacity, because you know you'd be hearing those Foles chants every turnover for Mitchell Trubisky. So, but I'm still going to take the Bears there. It's going to be a rough season for both of those teams. I love Matt Nagy. If he can get a legitimate quarterback in there, I would like what they can do over there. Another 1 o'clock game is the Raiders at the Panthers, the new Las Vegas Raiders. I don't trust the Raiders a lot there. I think there's some talent on that offense, particularly in Waller, but they kind of fizzled that over the last 4 or 5 games last year on offense. That defense, I think, is absolutely atrocious. Gruden is playing the long game here on that 10-year contract. He's only in his second year there. And then over in Carolina, there's an absolute rebuild from top to bottom. We've changed our owner. We've had changes in the front office. We've now went out and paid an exorbitant amount of money for Matt Rule, like out of Baylor, and he, has this, famous, kind of air raid similar offense style there. That's going to take time to implement. I do like Teddy Bridgewater a lot. I think he's a very talented player. I think recently in the last few years he's like 16-6 as a starter, which is really good. But he is for me, a ceiling of what he could be. And even though I love McCaffrey, I love DJ Moore, I love Curtis Samuel, they're rebuilding that defense entirely. Spent the only team in the draft this year that spent the entire draft, all of their picks on the defensive side of the ball. They're trying to change the culture over there.
And there's really no choice because their stalwart for so many years, Luke Kuechly,
what a shock
suddenly.
That was. Yeah, that was such a shock.
Nobody saw that coming. So I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, and I didn't hear your prediction for this game, but this is a game...
I'm going Panthers.
You're going Panthers. I think I'm leaning that way, too. I don't really know what to expect from this game at all.
No.
Either of these two teams.
Or the season for these two teams.
Right. Like, what is Derek Carr?
I don't know. And we're going to find out this year because if he goes through another mediocre year, he's out. Because Gruden is now, he's out.
And, the Gruden thing is fascinating because you're talking about the 10-year contract. Which
never seen anything like that.
Never seen anything like it. And, they've just been... Who really knows? But I'm going with Carolina because they have the ultimate difference maker, and that's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And playing at home, you get some advantage there. Honestly, the most interesting thing about the Raiders is moving to Las Vegas and seeing the new stadium and seeing how that's been progressing. That's really it. Another 1 o'clock game, your Jets that we've touched on.
Oh, boy.
Jets at Buffalo. I'm taking the Buffalo Bills.
I don't think we need to say any more.
No, I just think, as we've talked about, we don't need to beat a dead horse. There's not a lot there. I really do love Sam Darnold, but there is not a lot on that offense. That defense is missing key pieces. You had Mosley opt out as well. It's going to be a long season there for the New York Jets, the Jets. And the Bills, I think, they're primed to win this division. I don't think they'll go far into the playoffs. Josh Allen needs to make serious strides, but with the addition we talked about earlier with Diggs, how great that defense is, led by Tre'Davious White at cornerback, I'm going Buffalo Bills.
Well, we know you like to, whether it's joking or actually believing.
It's an inside joke we have over
You've
here.
been a Bills believer going back to, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was saying they're going to go 14-2 every year. Probably not going to be quite that good. But they'll be good enough to beat the Jets. And looking at this matchup specifically, I just don't see how the Jets are going to generate any kind of offense.
Yeah.
We talk about how good this Bills defense is, and Darnold just has so limited weapons, as you mentioned. One guy that they took in the second round, Denzel Mims, already dealing with an injury. So what do they have at receiver? Brashad Perriman, Jamison Crowder's a nice security blanket.
He's a good slot receiver, reception guy.
But I just don't see a whole lot of difference makers there, and so I'm going with the Bills. I think they're going to handle them pretty easily.
Interesting, too, because I really do like Mims, so we'll see how he fits in when he comes back. I want to see how that Bell and Adam Gase relationship progresses over the season. What happens? Touches on a point earlier, I said, another talented quarterback, you are wasting his prime years with what you're doing there. That's bad.
There's no doubt.
Really
and,
bad.
One of the only moves they made was bringing in the ageless wonder, Frank Gore.
Oh,
we know what he could do, but, the bottom line is he's getting up there.
Yeah, I mean, how much is he going to offer you?
Exactly.
What are the Jets doing? I'm hoping they're turning a corner with the haul that they got with the Jamal Adams trade. This is going to be a very rough year.
I do like Chris Herndon. I think he's a guy who's going to produce tight end.
Definitely a possibility, but losing Robbie Anderson, that kind of really stinks.
Yeah.
Browns at Ravens in the 1 o'clock slot.
This is a good one.
I'm going to take the Ravens, but this is going to be way closer than people think it is. If this was in Cleveland, I probably would have took the Browns. They beat them once last year. They actually handled them pretty well, and Nick Chubb ran wild. The Browns have an extreme amount of talent on that offense. We'll see how Kevin Stefanski changes the culture over there. Baker Mayfield has talked about he feels more comfortable in this offense. It feels more adult-like than whatever that mess that we could talk about a whole podcast of Freddie Kitchens. That was a disaster from the start. I don't know why they hired him. But this is on Baker. He needs to have a great year or he's going to be in some serious hot water with the talent he has here. But you're playing arguably the Super Bowl favorites in the Ravens. Maybe you're not the Super Bowl favorites and the Chiefs are because if they haven't got it done in the playoffs. But in the regular season, Lamar Jackson has improved year to year. I expect him to come out with another addition to his game of how he improved. And this offense is loaded. This defense is great. I love John Harbaugh. This is going to be a good one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a reason the Ravens are one of the favorites to get to the Super Bowl and even win it. Last year, you think about the record-setting numbers running the football. I mean, with what Mark Ingram did and Lamar Jackson, it was just an unstoppable offense because of their ability to just pound the rock. Now, they probably aren't going to be able to do that with quite the same efficiency this year, but it's still a really good offense, really good offensive line. You have to still expect another great year from Lamar Jackson. And I agree with you. I expect better things from the Cleveland Browns this year. The offense, the weapons around Baker Mayfield, I have to believe he's going to be better. The atrocity with the coach last year and Freddie Kitchens, you just have to believe they're going to be better. Eventually, talent does win out, and I think sometimes you have to take that step back before you take a step forward. Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to see from Cleveland this year. That said, tomorrow, you got to go with Baltimore.
Yeah, definitely, and this is my most interesting watch for the 1 o'clock games is by far is this game. The final 1 o'clock game is Seattle at Atlanta. I'm taking Seattle because I trust their quarterback more there. I do think people are sleeping on the Falcons. I think they could be a borderline end of the season competing for a wild card spot because they really love their coach in Dan Quinn and they fought for him last year when he looked like he was dead in the water, going to get fired. But that defense that around the Super Bowl was so talented and I really like the direction that they were going has kind of just not shown up, has had a ton of injuries, and has really been lackluster. It's up to this offense that has now lost Austin Hooper. You have wide receivers there galore.
Yeah.
Can Matt Ryan get it together? Can that offensive line get it together? That's my question. But playing Seattle, who, as we've talked, has major defensive questions, but I love Russell Wilson, and I think he's taking this one.
I'm going Seattle, too. I'm waiting for the game that we disagree on, if there's going to be one.
Straight through the 1 o'clock.
It seems like, most of these matchups are pretty clear-cut. Yeah. And Atlanta, I have less questions than you. I think their offense is going to be really good. Yeah. I just think there's a lot of talent. For me with Atlanta, it more comes down to the defense. But I'm going to take the Seahawks in this game. I think it's a big game for Russell Wilson through the air, that vulnerable Atlanta defense at times. And
yes.
I'm taking Seattle.
And they have had some great matchups in recent years, in about the last 5 years.
Yeah.
From playoffs to regular season, they've had some great matchups. I expect this to be a pretty decent game. Moving on to our 3-4 o'clock game. So we have one at 4:05 and two at 4:25. So the 4:05 game is Chargers at Bengals at Cincinnati. I'm taking the Chargers. I don't think obviously Tyrod Taylor is the future because you have Justin Herbert waiting in the wings there. But there is so much talent on this team. You can argue that they are a little weak at offensive line, but all over the place. You're going to get Mike Williams back at some point. That defense is really good. I think Derwin James is banged up again, right?
Yeah, I think he's out for the year.
Yeah, so he's out for the year again. So that is a major loss whatsoever. But you're playing Cincinnati, who's arguably one of the worst teams in the league. They are rebuilding over there. Do we trust who Zach Taylor is?
You know him from the Rams.
Yeah, and he only had one role and experience he had over with the Rams. He was kind of a low-level position coach. Is he a head coach material? He has a tall task over there. I like some of their pieces in your Tyler Boyds, and AJ Green is still there. I do like Joe Burrow, but you're asking him to do a lot with not a great defense and no preparation this whole offseason. I think the Chargers roll here.
I'm going to surprise you here. I'm going to take the upset.
There it is, the first one.
I just, sometimes with week one, you get some fluky results.
Fair enough.
Week one is one of the hardest weeks to predict. You don't really know exactly what some teams are going in. You get a better feel after.
Especially this season.
Right. They've gotten a few games with no preseason, especially. But I'm going to say it's a big debut for Joe Burrow. I think he's going to look like the real deal. Here. I think AJ Green, it's a big day. He's got some weapons at wide receiver there. And I just don't trust the Chargers at all. And them going out on the road, I just think it's a letdown game for them. And I think there's going to be a lot of hype around Burrow surrounding that first game, that debut. I'm going to take them, Cincinnati.
Fair enough. I think the Chargers, we can both agree, have been a letdown with all the talent they've had.
Yes.
I like the upset pick, so there's our first disagreement there. The first 4:25 game is Cardinals at Niners. I'm taking the Niners. I know they've had injury issues there. What's going to happen? Because I think Brandon Ayuk, their first-round pick that they took, he's banged up there at wide receiver. I do have questions of their wide receiver talent and the health of it going forward. Now that they lost Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints. Mm-hmm. But they're a ground and pound team first and foremost, and that defense is terrifying of what they do. They get rid of DeForest Buckner or whatever. He goes to the Colts, and then you immediately replace him with more talent on that defensive line. They're scary. They're, I would say, the favorite right now of the NFC. And the Cardinals, while an interesting team over there with Kyler Murray, they still don't have enough pieces. The Niners are taking this.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of high thoughts about Kyler Murray this year. And
because of the Hopkins trade, too.
Certainly an exciting player with all he's able to do, and such a small guy, what he's able to do at the quarterback position. But yeah, San Francisco, clearly the more complete team. They're the classic case of building a team with the foundation. Each of the lines.
Both lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you have that, it makes for a good
It's very,
team.
with the Kyle Shanahan, very echoes his dad, right, of Mike Shanahan.
Right.
It's clearly right there, what he did with those Denver teams.
And it's an easy recipe for success because in the end, you can talk about all the flashy players at wide receiver and all that, but football at its core is won in the trenches. And that's what the 49ers have. Yeah,
I totally agree with that there. A lot of people get kind of fall in love with the air game, the passing game. You got to go back and make sure your lines are secure first. It's about protecting your quarterback and going after theirs. The other 4:25 game is, I would say, maybe the game of the week. The most interesting watch right now is it's the Bucs at the Saints. And now this would have been a fascinating game in general. But then you add Tom Brady and all the offseason that Tampa's had, and you go, holy crap, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks that we rarely get to see go against each other. Let's do this. In this game, I'm taking the Saints because not only they're at home, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time for this Bucs team to gel. But this is going to be a great game when they go back to Tampa when they play later in the year, and they might even meet in the playoffs. This team, they're going to be going back and forth of who's in first all year. It's going to be a fantastic game that we're going to watch here, but I'm taking the Saints.
I couldn't agree more with your point about taking time to gel, especially when you haven't had the postseason because of the pandemic, limited time getting to know the new personnel.
The preseason.
The preseason, right. That there's going to be an adjustment period, and I think we're going to see that. We'll see how many games it takes, but the Saints are one of the real upper echelon teams, and they're very balanced. They have Kamara in the fold now, locked up to an extension. You know how good Michael Thomas is.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And as we just mentioned, you add Sanders there as kind of another option as well.
And I think that was something they needed, another deep threat for Breeze. And he doesn't quite have the same arm strength that he once did, but he could still get the ball deep. And with a guy like Sanders, they're still going to score a lot of points. They're very balanced, very complete. I think all the ingredients are here for a Saints win.
Yeah, and also I do like Jared Cook over the middle too there, and kind of the what he offers as the tight end position. So that is going to be a great game, and a pretty underrated defense there. There's some great players on that Saints defense as well as the Bucs. That's going to be a really good game. The Sunday night game, which we get to my Rams here, is Cowboys at Rams. There's going to be absolutely no fans because the game's played in the brand new stadium that they have here.
It might be pushed off from
It might be pushed off because of the fires. So at the time of recording this and posting, news might be different. This might be a very a la Chiefs-Rams situation in Mexico. Could be a situation there, but assuming that the game is played, I'm taking the Cowboys. I know that shocks me as a Rams fan, but you have to be unbiased. I don't think this game is going to be close. I hope I'm dead wrong. I'm going to root for the Rams every second. I just think that I don't know what the Rams are coming out here. I feel like they're a very 8-8, 9-7 team again. This defense is very suspect. And remember, these two teams played in Week 15 last year when the Rams season was still on the line, and the Cowboys annihilated them in Jerry World. I just think that there's an issue there with how is it going to gel with Mike McCarthy, and there's been no offseason, and it's a new offense, and everything Dak went through this offseason, whether it was his brother passing away or the contract negotiation drama, but it seems like even though we've beaten them a time here or there, we beat them once in Jerry World and then beat them in the playoff game, I feel like the Cowboys always beat us, and they beat us bad, so I'm taking the Cowboys here.
I'm really fascinated to see, we talk about the coaching change with now Mike McCarthy stepping in for Jason Garrett. Can he get this team over the hump? Because it's another team that you've looked at on paper and said they should be a Super Bowl contender.
They should, with all that talent, especially on offense.
Especially on offense, where it's never better than it is now with the addition now of C.D. Lamb.
You could argue that the offensive line is a little bit older, and they lost Travis Frederick this offseason, but still, they got talent.
And you talk about running 3 wide receivers out there, and Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup with Lamb. I mean, there's just so many...
still in the backfield. I mean, come on.
So many ways for Dak to go with the football. The tight ends, by the way, aren't too bad. Blake Jarwin.
No, he's not great. It's definitely come out of camp that he's not been great in the blocking game, but as a pass catcher, he's been really emerging.
So, I mean, I know Dak Prescott's very much a polarizing figure. There's a myriad of thoughts about him. Is he the guy to lead this team to the promised land 100%. Eventually? Or are they going to give him the big contract that he seeks? But the bottom line is he just has so many guys around him. I think the Cowboys roll on Sunday. I agree. Beat the Rams.
Yeah. That's kind of the point of where I'm sitting at right now, unfortunately. Getting into the 2 Monday night games, which is customary for Week 1. We start off at the 7-10 game at the Steelers and Giants. I'm taking the Steelers here. I don't think that the Steelers are particularly a great team. I think they're more in that 8-8, 7-9, 9-7, somewhere fluctuating in there. But Ben, unless it's PR crap, is saying he's feeling the best he's felt in years, so he got the elbow fixed over there. Is Juju Smith-Schuster a number 1? It looks like not, but I still think there's enough talent there, and especially on that defense with TJ Watt. Mm-hmm. And the Giants are... Listen, Daniel Jones has actually impressed me for what he's been given, and I like Saquon Barkley, but we still need more help here. Sterling Shepard, the guy. What are we doing here? And that defense is absolutely rebuilding. It's bad. So I'm taking the Steelers.
I think this will be a closer game than people think.
Okay.
The first game with Joe Judge as the new head coach, and by the way, he runs this team like it's a military unit.
Yeah, I actually really have liked what he's been doing.
You heard the other day him stopping practice because he didn't like what he saw and, really grilling into his team. So you could tell he set the tone from that opening press conference.
The tennis balls on the DB's hands, you see that one?
I mean, this is a guy who clearly is no nonsense, who is a tough guy to play for.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming from the New England school with Bill Belichick, his special team coach. So I think he's what the Giants needed. I think they really lacked discipline the last couple of years.
100%.
With Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo both running the show.
Ben McAdoo, Jesus.
So I think the Giants will be a little bit improved, but I agree with you. They still have a long way to go. They got to rebuild that defense. Yeah. And I'm going to take the Steelers in a fairly close game on Monday.
Yeah, it might not be particularly pretty to watch, but I still think they're going to take that. I like the direction, though, the Giants are going. That's just going to take a lot of time.
And they got to get Saquon Barkley back to an elite player.
Yeah, elite player, and that starts with that offensive line playing better. And the final game of Week 1 at the 10:20, that late slot for Week 1 in the Monday night games that most people won't be staying up for, it's Titans at Broncos.
Interesting game.
A very interesting game. I could see this one going either way. I'm going to take the Titans. And the only reason that I'm taking that is because we're not having the fans, that great crowd that you would normally have in Mile High. Maybe they'll have some fans, but it won't be to the capacity it was. And they just lost Von Miller this week, out for the season. They had offensive tackle at the right tackle opt out earlier this season. And Bradley Chubb is banged up. It ain't looking great for Denver, who I thought had some promising pieces. I really like the Jerry Jeudy kind of pickup wide receiver. I like what they have over there, but do I trust Drew Lock at this point? He has to prove it to me. And I'm taking the Titans, who I know what they are. I know they're going to be tough with Mike Vrabel. I know they're going to ground and pound with Derrick Henry, and I know that defense is going to show up.
Well, boy, were they impressive the second half of last year.
Yes, all the way to the AFC Conference.
All the way, and what they did in the playoffs, and Derrick Henry just being a beast and making the most out of Ryan Tannehill and committing him now as their quarterback.
That I don't necessarily agree with that, but sure, I get it.
I am going to take Denver in this game. So
it's a second disagreement.
It's not too many, but Denver, one of the better home field advantages. I know we talk about not having fans, but it still means something playing at home. And I just think
that's because you have that altitude as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Broncos are improved offensively.
Yes.
Now, I agree with you that we don't know exactly what Drew Lock is yet, but I think they're pretty comfortable now with what he is. They have a new offensive coordinator. I think with Pat Shurmur, he's much better suited being a coordinator than a head coach.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And, they've got some weapons at receiver. I like Noah Fant a lot at tight end.
I do like Noah Fant.
So I think the Titans take a little bit of a step back here. I wonder if the ground and pound can work over the long haul, and I'm going to take the Broncos.
And can Tannehill step up in that position? The one thing I will say about Drew Lock is I love that he seems like he has supreme confidence when he's out there. He seemed like he is relaxed on the sideline, and then he has the respect of his players as a very young player in this league. So I think that spells high hopes there for Denver.
All right, so two disagreements.
So two disagreements through the entire slate. Week 1, I don't think is too crazy. I think there's a lot of predictable games, but I think but you never know. I mean, there's always, crazy upsets that happen in the NFL. But guys, let us know what you thought of kind of our picks down below. I understand that we ran a little bit long here. Than we normally plan to do, and that's just because it's the first one. And me and Brian haven't talked about a lot of the off-season things. There's going to be a shorter format to this, going through game and talking about the previous week going forward. This is going to be mostly a weekly segment or weekly, about 10-day segment, depending on our work schedules. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our first podcast of First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. Let us know what you thought of it down below. We'd love to talk football with you guys, and just a way to kind of expand the platform and to find more sports fans. And other than that, guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you be so kind. And until next week for First and 10, thank you, Brian, for being on.
It was a blast.
And it was fun. It was great. Thank you. And until then, guys, thanks for watching.